Chapter 16, Untuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. The constable was fat and he was sleepy. He wheezed when he spoke, and he spoke quite a bit as they started off, he and the man in the yellow suit. First they roused me out of bed in the middle of the night after I'd been up since sunup looking for that child, and now I suppose you're going to try to run me all that way, he said sourly. I got to tell you, this horse of mine is none too strong. I don't have to hurry her as a rule, so most of the time it don't matter. Seems to me you could have waited till dawn, anyway. The man in the yellow suit was as courteous as always. The Fosters have been waiting since yesterday morning, he pointed out. Naturally, they're very upset. The sooner we get there, the sooner that child will be with them again. How come you're so deep in it? Asked the constable suspiciously. Maybe you're in cahoots with the kidnappers. How do I know? You should have reported it right off when you saw her get snatched. The man in the yellow suit sighed. But of course I had to find out where they were taking her, he explained patiently. I came right back after that. And the Fosters are friends of mine. They've, sold me their wood. The constable's eyes went round. I'll bet, he said. What did you do about that? What do you know about that? I didn't suppose they'd ever do a thing like that, friend or no friend. They're the first family around here, you know. Proud as peacocks, all of 'em. Family proud and land proud, too. But they've sold off, they did. Well, then, and he whistled in amazement. They thumped along in silence for a while, out around the wood and across the starlit meadow. Then the constable yawned deeply and said, You ready to tell me how long this is going to take? How far we got to go? 20 miles north, said the man in the yellow suit. The constable groaned. 20 miles? He shifted his shotgun that rested across his saddle and groaned again. Clear up in the foothills? That's far away, all right. There was no reply to this. The constable ran his fingers down the gleaming barrel of the shotgun. Then he shrugged and slumped a little in the saddle. Might as well relax, he wheezed suddenly, companionably. We'll be riding 3-4 hours. Still there was no reply. Yes, sir, said the constable. Yes, said the constable, trying again. It's something new for these parts, kidnapping. Never had a case in this before like I know of, and I've been in charge going on 15 years. He waited. You don't say so, his companion said at last. Yep, that's a fact, said the constable, with evident relief. Maybe now there will be some conversation. Yep, 15 years. Seen a lot of trouble in 15 years, but nothing quite like this. Of course, there's a first time for everything, as they say. We got a brand new jailhouse, did you notice? Listen, it's a dandy. Give them folks nice, clean accommodations, he chuckled. Of course, they won't be there long. Circuit judge, I'll be coming through next week. He'll send 'em over to Charlesville, most likely to the county jail. That's what they'll do for your serious crimes. Of course, we got a gallows of our own, but we've never used it. Keeps trouble down. I think just having it there, ain't never used it. That's because it can take care of serious stuff over Charlesville, like I say. The constable paused to light a cigar and went on cheerfully. What you got planned for that piece of foster land? Going to clear it? Pup up a house or store, maybe? No, said the man in the yellow suit. The constable waited for more, but there was no more. His sour mood returned. He frowned and shook the ashes from his cigar. Say, he said, you're a kind of close-lippered fellow, ain't you? The man in the yellow suit narrowed his eyes. His mouth, above the thin gray beard, twitched with annoyance. Look here, he said tightly. Would you mind if I rode on ahead? I'm worried about that child. I'll let you know how to get there, and I'll go on ahead and keep watch. Well, said the constable grudgingly, all right, if you're in such a ding-dong hurry, but don't do nothing till I get there. Those folks are likely dangerous. I'll try to keep up. But this horse of mine, she's none too strong. Don't see how I could get her to gallop even if I tried. That's right, said the man in the yellow suit. So I'll go on ahead and wait outside the house till you get there. He explained the route carefully, then dug his heels into the flanks of the fat old horse, carrying off into the darkness where just a hint of dawn glowed on the edges of the hill far ahead. The constable chewed on the end of his cigar. Huh, he said to his horse. Did you get a gander at that suit of clothes? Oh, well, it takes all kinds, as they say, as he followed slowly after, yawning. the gap between him and the man ahead lengthening with every mile. Chapter 17. For the second morning in a row, Winnie Foster woke early. Outside the ring of trees around the pond, the birds were celebrating, giving the new day a brass band's worth of greetings. Winnie freed herself from the twisted quilt and went to a window. Mist lay on the surface of the water, and the light was still pale. It looked unreal, and she felt herself unreal awakening where she had, with her hair wild and her dress all crumpled. She rubbed her eyes through the dewy weeds below the window. A toad hopped suddenly into view, and Winnie peered at it eagerly. But no, of course it wasn't the same toad. And remembering that the other toad, her toad, she thought now, almost fondly, it seemed to her that she had been away from home for weeks. Remember that toad. Then she heard a step on the loft stairs and thought, Jessie? At once her cheeks flamed. But it was Miles. He came into the parlor, and when he saw her, that she was up, he smiled and whispered, Good, you're awake. Come on, you can catch me. Come help me catch some fish for breakfast. This time Winnie was careful not to make a noise when she climbed into the rowboat. She made her way to the back seat in the stern, and Miles handed her 2 old cane poles. Watch out for the hooks, he warned her, and a jar of bait. Pork fat cuts into little pieces. A big brown night moth fluttered out from under the oar blades propped beside her on the seat, and wobbled off toward nowhere through the fragrant air. And from the bank something plopped into the water, a frog, when he caught just a glimpse of it as it scissored away from shore. The water was so clear that she could see tiny brown fish near the bottom, flickering this way and that. Miles pushed the rowboat off and sprang in, and soon they were gliding up toward the end of the pond, where the water came out from the stream. The locks grated as the oars dipped and swung, but Miles was skillful. He rowed without a single splash. The dripping from the blades, as they lifted, sent rows of overlapping circles spreading silently behind them. It was very peaceful. They'll take me home today, thought Winnie. She was somehow certain of this, and began to feel quite cheerful. She had been kidnapped, but nothing bad had happened, and now it was almost over. Now, remembering the visits of the night before, she smiled and found that she loved them, this most peculiar family. They were her friends, after all, and hers alone. How'd you sleep? Miles asked her. All right, she said. That's good, I'm glad. Ever been fishing before? No, she told him. You'll like it, it's fun, and he smiled at her. The mist was lifting now. As the sun poked up above the trees, the water sparkled. Miles guided the rowboat near a spot where lily pads lay like upturned palms on the surface. We'll let her drift here some, he said. There'll be trout down in those weeds and stems. Here, give me the poles, and I'll bait the hooks for us. Winnie sat watching him as he worked. His face was like Jessie's, and yet not alike. It was thinner, without Jessie's round cheeks, and paler, and his hair was almost straight, clipped neatly below the ears. His hands were different, too, the fingers thicker, the skin scrubbed looking, but black at the knuckles and under the nails. When he remembered that he worked sometimes as a blacksmith, and indeed his shoulders under his thoroughbred shirt were broad and muscled, he looked solid, like an oar, whereas Jessie, well, she decided Jessie was like water, thin and quick. Miles seemed to sense that she was watching him. He looked up from the bait jar, and his eyes, returning to her gaze, were soft. Remember I told you I had 2 children, he asked. Well, one of them was a girl. I took her fishing, too. His face clouded then, and he shook his head. Her name was Anna. Lord, how sweet she was, that child. It's queer to think that she'd be close to 80 now if she were still alive, and my son, he'd be 82. When he looked at his young, strong face, and after a moment she said, Why didn't you take them to the spring and give them some of the special water? Well, of course, we didn't realize about the spring while we were still on the farm, said Miles. Afterwards, I thought about going to find them. I wanted to, heaven knows, but Winnie, how'd it been if I had? My wife was nearly 40 by then, and the children, well, what was the use? They'd have been near grown themselves. They'd have a pa close to their same age they was. No, it'd have been so mixed up and peculiar, it just wouldn't have worked. Then Pa, he was dead set against it anyway. The fewer people knows about the spring, he says, the fewer there are to tell about it. Here's your pole. Just ease the hook down on the water. You'll know what to do when it bites. Winnie clutched her pole, sitting sideways in the stern, and watched the bait hook sink slowly down. A dragonfly, a brilliant blue jewel, darted up and paused over the lily pad, then swung up and away. From the nearest bank a bullfrog spoke. "There certainly are a lot of frogs out here," Winnie observed. "That's so," said Miles. "They'll keep coming, too, long as the turtles stay away. Snappers now, they'll eat all the frogs soon as they look at 'em." Winnie thought about his peril to the frogs. His sighed. "It'd be nice," she said, "if nothing ever had to die." "Well, now, I don't know," said Miles. "If you think on it, you come to see there'd be so many creatures, including people, they'd all be squeezing right up next to each other for a long time." Winnie squinted at her fishing line and tried to picture a teeming world. She said, "Yeah, I guess you're right." Suddenly the cane pole jerked in her hands and bent into an arch. Its tip dragged down nearly to the water surface. Winnie held on tight to the handle, her eyes wide. "Hey!" cried Miles. "Look here! You got a bite! Fresh trout for breakfast, Winnie!" But just as suddenly as the pole whipped straight again and the line went back, "Shucks!" said Miles. "It got away." "Kind of glad," Winnie admitted, easing her rigid grip on the butt of the pole. "You fish, Miles. I'm not sure I want to." And so they drifted for a little longer. The sky was blue and hard now, and the last of the mist dissolved, and the sun, stepping higher above the trees, was hot on Winnie's back. Personification again. The first week of August was reasserting itself after a long, good night's sleep. It would be another searing day. A mosquito appeared and sat down on Winnie's knee. She slapped at it absently, thinking about what Miles had said. If all the mosquitoes had lived, and if they kept on having babies, it would be terrible. The Tucks were right. It was best if no one knew about the spring, including the mosquitoes. She would keep the secret. She looked at Miles, and then she asked him, "What will you do if you've got so much time?" "Some day," said Miles, "I'll find a way to do something important." Winnie nodded. That was what she wanted. The way I see it," Miles went on, "it's no good to go hiding yourself away like Pa and lots of other people. And it's no good just thinking of your own pleasure either. People got to do something useful if you're going to take up space in the world." "But what will you do?" Winnie persisted. "I don't know yet," said Miles. "I ain't no schooling nor nothing, and that makes it harder." Then he set his jaw and added, "I'll find a way, though. I'll locate something." Winnie nodded. She reached out and ran her fingers across the lily pad that lay on the water beside the boat. It was warm and very dry, like a blotter, but near its center was a single drop of water, round and perfect. She touched the drop and brought her finger tip back wet. But the drop of water, though it rolled a little, remained as round and perfect as before. And then Miles caught a fish. There it flopped in the bottom of the boat, its jaw working, its gills fanning rapidly. Winnie drew up her knees and stared at it. It was beautiful and horrible, too, with gleaming, rainbow-colored scales and an eye like a marble beginning to dim even as she watched it. The hook was caught in its upper lip, and suddenly Winnie wanted to weep. "Put it back, Miles," she said, her voice dry and harsh. "Put it back right away." Miles started to protest, and then, looking at her face, picked up the trout and gently worked the barbed hook free. "All right, Winnie," he said. He dropped the fish over the edge of the boat. It flipped its tail and disappeared under the lily pad. "Will it be all right?" asked Winnie, feeling foolish and happy both at once. "It'll be all right," Miles assured her. And then he said, "People got to be meat-eaters sometimes, though. It's the natural way, and that means killing things." "I know," said Winnie weakly, "but still." "Yes," said Miles, "I know." Okay, I'll read you chapter 18 and 19 later.